Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd, fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to our live podcast. The topic we're talking about in discussion is Muslim Marriages Unfiltered. And today, inshallah, we shall be talking about King Richard II and his marriage to Isabella. And with me in studio, I have Sheikh Muhammad Ali. And today, inshallah, I will say tonight, but it's daytime. Today, inshallah, we'll be discussing King Richard and his marriage and a bit more into the history of the marriages that took place within this culture. So, without any further ado, Sheikh, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, very well. Just enjoying the weather, the heat.
Heat wave.
The heat wave, yeah. Until last, we enjoy it, inshallah.
Inshallah.
It's been a while since I sat with you on this
Yes.
blessed podcast
Alhamdulillah.
and this blessed room, mashallah.
Mashallah.
So today we're discussing, talking about King Richard II. So first of all, Sheikh, I will ask you, okay, who is King Richard?
Who was?
Or who was?
Who was?
Who was King Richard? It's gone a long time ago, actually.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So King Richard II, he was King of England. And he became King of England at the age of 10 in the year 1377. And he remained King of England for 22 years until he was deposed. His cousin got rid of him and imprisoned him. So he became king at the age of 10 and he was a king for 22 years. So early life of King Richard II, he was born in January 1367. Which is why then he became king at 1377. And he was actually born in France, as we know it today, in Bordeaux in particular. And this was then the English-held territories in France. So England have held territories in many a place. And this was one of the English-held territories. So you could argue that either King Richard II was born in France and was French, or you could say because he was born in English-occupied territory in France, he was actually English.
So I think that time would suit more that it was English, wasn't it? Because
Maybe, well, he was English, but born in France, in English-held territories. But if you define somebody's heritage as where you was born, then I am British because I was born in Britain. And Richard II is then either French because he was born in France, or you could argue he was British because he was born in English-held territory in France.
you see, if that was English-held territory, but that is, for that time, it's English then, isn't it? It's part of England then, isn't it?
So then those people who were born in British India, what are they?
Yeah, it's a question.
If Britain occupied India and you had British India, then those British people born in India will be British.
Yeah, I think with that, most of the world were British occupied. They're
British then. So that is the issue. So our forefathers are British because they were born in British-held India, the British India. But anyway, interesting point. It's a history brings about many interesting points and conversations. So he was born. Anyway, he was a son of a person called Edward. Edward would have become king after his grandfather. So basically you had Edward III. Edward III was king. His son Edward was going to take over from him. But the son Edward died. And 1 year later, King Edward died. Yes? So you have Edward the king, his son Edward, his son Richard.
So King Richard was the only one that was left to take
So
the
King Richard
throne.
then, he took over from his grandfather when his grandfather passed away. And as I say, at that time he was 10 years old. And again, the norm of the society at the time was that a 10-year-old could become king. How much of a great responsibility is it to be a king? but he could become king, and he would be the sovereign ruler of the country. So Richard, talk about his marriage now. Richard married twice. His first marriage was to a lady called Anne of Bohemia, and he married her in the year 1382. And guess what age Richard was at the time of this marriage? 15.
He was 15.
He was 15 years old. What you would call nowadays a 15-year-old boy. But then they would have said a 15-year-old man.
Yeah, if he's able to marry at that age.
He's a king. He's been king for 5 years. So he was 15. And Anne of Bohemia, she was also 15 at the time. So both of them were 15. They had no children. And Anne then died in the year 1394. Then the second marriage of Richard II was to Isabella of Valois. I noticed in the introduction you missed out the Valois, which is fine because unless you're comfortable with saying it and pronouncing it as the French do, it's a bit of a, oh my God, I don't want to say this wrong.
Isabella of Valois.
Valois, yeah. Like you say, avoir.
Yeah.
Yes, Valois. So the Isabella of Valois, she got married to King Richard II in the year 1396. And the intention behind the marriage was to strengthen peace with France, between England and France, because there was a lot of fighting for many, many years, a lot of killing. So they wanted to create a bit of a peace treaty. And one way they thought they would do that is for Richard II to marry Isabella. This was they're saying that the reason for the marriage was of a political nature. And throughout history, marriages have taken place that are of a political nature. And you could also call this an arranged marriage because you're trying to arrange a marriage between the King of England and a princess from France. And it's not like they met each other walking up or down the street or got to know each other at college or at work. Yeah. He's the King of England. She's Isabella of Valois. She's the daughter of a king.
Daughter, but who arranges marriage? Not
exactly.
Themselves.
They didn't arrange it. It was arranged marriage.
Arranged marriage.
So yes, definitely King Richard II had an arranged marriage with Isabella. At that time, strikingly, and maybe to the shock of most people, Isabella was only 6 years old.
6 years old.
She married 6 years old,
the King Edward,
and she married Richard at the time. And Richard at the time was around 28, 29 years old. Okay, so if he was born in 1367 and this marriage took place in 1396, he was 29 years old at the time. So a 29-year-old married a 6-year-old. And it is said now that the marriage was never consummated. So that they got married and they didn't consummate the marriage.
Until?
At all.
Oh, they didn't.
They didn't. And I'll tell you why they didn't consummate the marriage. Because they're saying that if she'd reached 12, then they would have consummated the marriage at 12. But because she was 6, then they say the marriage was never consummated. Right? Because then they were only married for 3 years. So she got married to him at 6. At 9, when she was 9 years old, she became a widow. Because he was deposed.
Okay.
9, 10 years old she was when she became a widow. So they're saying that because she hadn't reached 12, the marriage was never consummated. But if the marriage was consummated, you really think that would be publicized? That's his wife. She's 6. Yeah. He's 29.
Yeah.
That's his wife now. And what is there to stop them consummating the marriage?
Nothing.
Only the historians say that there is no evidence to prove that the marriage was consummated. But let's say it was consummated. What evidence would you wish for? Do you want some CCTV footage? How are you going to evidence that? Of course, there's going to be no evidence because whatever happened behind closed doors.
Of course.
Right? So Richard has married Isabella and they cannot categorically say the marriage was never consummated. They're saying it's highly unlikely that it was. But highly unlikely does not mean definitely. There is still a possibility of the fact that Richard consummated his marriage with 6-year-old Isabella. But historically, there's no proof for that. But there's no proof either way.
No proof either way.
So it is what it is. They say that the marriage was never consummated. This is what the historians say and speculate. What happened then? The downfall of Richard II. In 1399, Richard left England and he was campaigning in Ireland. And his cousin, Henry Bolingbroke, who later became king, he became King Henry IV. So what happened is, when the grandfather passed away, who was the grandfather? Edward III.
Edward III.
When Edward III died, Richard II took over and he forced his cousin Henry into exile.
In exile, okay.
Then whilst Richard was king, there were many people who weren't happy with Richard. Richard's gone to Ireland to campaign there, and Henry has come, gained support, and taken over. Then Richard II has been deposed and then been imprisoned in Pontefract prison.
In Pontefract?
Yes.
Not far from
close to where we are. So he gained the support, Henry Bolingbroke. He reclaimed lands that Richard had confiscated from him. And then he's regained the support of the English nobility, and he's taken over. Richard surrendered. He was forced to abdicate the throne. Henry, his cousin Henry Bolingbroke, became Henry IV of England. And this marked the beginning of what they call the House of Lancaster. So then here, the death of Richard II. Richard then died in captivity, as I mentioned, at Pontefract. Specifically Pontefract Castle, okay, in February, the year 1400. Okay, so he was deposed in 1399. He died in the year 1400. And his wife was 10 years old at the time. So he died at the age 33. A lot of people died early them days, either being killed or due to famine or due to illness and disease and various things. So one of the reasons why people would marry early then is because life expectancy was very short.
Okay, makes sense.
So the circumstances there were what they were, and that's how they lived. Now, most historians believe that Richard II, he died from starvation. Now, there is a dispute regarding, was his starvation due to himself, meaning was his cousin Henry IV, King Henry IV, feeding him, and he died because he didn't want to eat and he was on a hunger strike, or did he not feed him and he died of starvation? So he died of starvation, and they say that whether it was a choice or by force, this remains uncertain. Shakespeare now, interestingly, everybody knows William Shakespeare. We study Shakespeare's novels and plays rather in school.
Romeo and Juliet and
Romeo and Juliet and all of this. So the life of Richard II inspired William Shakespeare to write a play. And this historic play is known as Richard II. And this play that Shakespeare wrote explores the themes of kingship, legitimacy, political power, etc. And while we're talking about Shakespeare, the interesting thing is that Shakespeare has another very famous play, which is the most famous one that everybody knows about, is Romeo and Juliet. Now, Juliet, at the time of her relationship with Romeo, was 13 years old. Romeo at that time, they say, was around 16 to 18. So there's some age difference between them. But she was 13 and he was 16 to 18. And Lady Capulet, remember who Lady Capulet was? Lady Capulet was the mother of Juliet.
Juliet, okay.
And she said to Juliet that I'd had you, meaning you were born. I was a mother to you when I was your age, Juliet. So Juliet's mother had her when she was 13 or 14.
You see, at that time, this was a normal, it's a normal thing, wasn't it? It's right. Nothing that,
There was nothing taboo. No. There was nothing to criticize. There was nothing to, use to demonize or make out like someone's doing something wrong.
Wrong,
It was a norm of the society.
It was, yeah.
Rather, speaking against this would have been seen as wrong and taboo.
Which was really funny nowadays like especially on social media, when they talk about young age marriages, even from before, they talk about it as if it's such a bad thing, such an evil thing.
But they're measuring
Such a
that
wrong
according to
thing.
what they understand and feel and what society now wants to apply. But at that time, if someone said to Richard, you're getting married to Isabella and she's 6 years old and you're 29, you're a pedophile, that person's head would have been chopped
It would
off.
be chopped off, yeah. It would have,
Because
it would have
and
been
nobody would have agreed that was pedophilia. It just wasn't seen like that.
killed. No.
Because they're saying that there was a contract made. And what they're saying is that he didn't consummate the marriage with her, but he would have if she was 12. Meaning that even if you say he didn't consummate the marriage at 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 11,
Did he at 12?
he would have definitely consummated
At
the marriage
12.
with her at 12. And they're saying that he resisted and she resisted and there was no marriage consummation. But at 12, he definitely would have consummated the marriage with her, right? But she didn't reach that age. So therefore, they're saying the marriage was not consummated.
Okay, so next, who was Isabella? Let's talk about
Isabella of Valois then, she was a French princess, as I mentioned earlier, and she became Queen of England. So can you see how a foreigner, a French person, she was French.
She was, oh yeah.
She was French.
She was, yeah.
She was the daughter of the French king, and she was the daughter of Charles the Sixth, right, of France. So Charles the Sixth of France was definitely French. He was Charles the Sixth of France. His daughter Isabella is French. So a foreign woman, girl, you could say at the time, has become at the age of 6 Queen of England.
Queen of England.
So can you see how foreigners have then come into this Great Britain and England, this country of ours? This was a foreign woman, and Richard married this foreign woman, and the foreign woman became Queen of England.
So, when we talk about, we're taking our country back, who are we taking it back from?
I don't know. Whose country is it,
Whose
and who we
country is
taking
it?
it back from, and when we take it back, who we going to give it to,
Who are we going to give it to?
and whose country was it initially?
So a lady from France, she's not British.
I think we
she's
need to take the
nothing to do
country
with-
back from her, to be honest.
Take it back from.
I think we need to take it back from the French, because she's come and she's become queen.
she becomes
right?
queen.
And interesting, they've not had any children because they said they didn't consummate the marriage. So if they had, then the future king or queen would have been a descendant of an Englishman and a French woman. Okay. So Isabella of Valois, she was a French princess. She became Queen of England and second wife of Richard II. Yeah. So Anne of Bohemia was the first wife, and then she died. And they're saying that although she was queen, she never ruled independently. And this is because at the time she was queen, Richard II was king. And when Henry IV took over and deposed his cousin Richard II, then Isabella was just there, right? Still married to him. So she never ruled independently. And this marriage then, or Isabella herself, is especially remembered for her childhood marriage. But she's not remembered for her childhood marriage in any way which is taboo or wrong. Nobody swears out or abuses or curses her father, Charles VI, and say, how on earth could Charles VI give his 6-year-old daughter in marriage
To a
to a
29-year-old.
29-year-old Richard II? It just wasn't seen like that, okay? So people have to be very
This was really
reasonable.
to promote the peace between
Yes,
the two
promote the
countries,
peace
wasn't it?
between the countries. But whether it's to promote the peace or not, the fact is that a marriage took place.
Yeah, it took place, of course.
And
yeah.
she was 6.
Regardless of what the reason was.
Regardless of what the reason was, she was 6. And they're saying they didn't consummate the marriage, but they would have if she was 12. And maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But they would have definitely, when she was 12 years old, which is still in today's criteria, put her as a child. Interestingly, they're saying that the marriage was arranged to promote peace between England and France. And that's the point that the historians keep putting forward. That people don't see this marriage in a negative light. See this marriage in a positive light. See it as a positive thing. That Richard has now married the Princess of France. Yes, Charles VI's daughter, And look at the sacrifice they're making. They are willing to arrange this marriage, have an arranged marriage in order to create peace and unity between England and France. So this is how the marriage is known to be, like a marriage to build bridges and peace. So in that sense, it's seen in a positive light.
Positive.
That Charles VI is willing to give his daughter in marriage to Richard, despite the age difference, in order to create peace and unity.
But see, in this matter here, they'll never talk about the age. They'll talk about the reason.
The reason. They won't say the age. They won't call it pedophilia.
No, they won't do
This will
that.
not be classed as child abuse. They will not be asking Richard II to sign the sex offenders register, because in that time and place, it wasn't seen like that. It wasn't the case. Okay. So, early life of Isabella of Valois. She was born on the 9th of November, 1389, and in Paris. And at that time when she was born, Richard was 22 years old.
When she was born.
So technically, Richard's old enough to be her father, right? He's old enough to be a father at that age. Okay. And interestingly, Brother Shahid, one thing I forgot to mention was when I mentioned that King Richard II was King of England from 1377. He was born in 1367 and he became king at 1377. That was 649 years ago.
From today,
From today.
649 years ago.
649 years ago from today.
Okay.
And if we compare that to the Islamic year, it was 799 after Hijrah.
So 799.
Yes.
99 years
Round it up
after,
to 800.
800 years after.
And what we're
Hijrah.
saying is that after the Prophet ﷺ migrated from Makkah Mukarramah to Medina Munawwara, that was the first year of Hijrah. 800 years after Islam, you could say.
Yeah.
Theologically, Islam was there from the very beginning, but in terms of the Sharia and Quran and Sunnah and the religion in the form it's, because it was reformed, in the form it's in today, 8 years after the advent of
years.
Islam, 800 years later, Richard II has become king, and then later he goes on to marry Isabella, right? So he'd already been king for 12 years. So he became king at the age of 10. He was king for 12 years. And then he's married Isabella. So now we're looking 809. Yes? 811 actually.
811
11 years after Hijrah is when he has now married Isabella of Valois. And he is now 29 years old and she is 6. And this wasn't something that was imposed by Islam. When Richard II married Isabella, this wasn't a Quranic teaching that he was following or a teaching of the prophetic narrations or Sunnah. This wasn't Sharia compliance. This was the norm within the society at the time.
Okay, now Richard, what kind of a Christian was he? Do you know about
He was
that?
a devout Christian. He was a devout Christian. He was a practicing individual, and he very much believed in he had this idea that his appointment as king was a divine appointment.
Okay. It's divine appointment.
He was considered to be like a divine. He was king because God wanted him to be king.
That was
And
his
he
belief.
was, yes, he was. They were very religious people at the time, and it was very, and there was a deep link between the church and also Richard II and him being king. So Isabella, as I mentioned, she was the daughter of Charles VI of France, and Richard II then, he married. So Isabella married Richard II in October 1396. At that time, she was 6 years old and Richard was 29. And they're saying that the marriage was negotiated as part of a truce during the 100 Years' War. So 100 years of battle between France and England, fighting, killing, and they arranged a truce. And as part of the truce, they negotiated, and part of the negotiation was this arranged marriage.
So this arranged marriage
Has taken place.
Stopped the 100-year war.
It wasn't a forced marriage, was it? It was
arranged.
a arranged marriage. Yeah, that's taken place between the King of England and this foreign person who is the Princess of France. So they say because she was a child, and they acknowledge that she was a child when she got married. They're saying the marriage was allegedly not consummated, and she spent much of her time in the royal household. suitable for her age. They're kind of saying that Richard kind of treated her more like a daughter than a wife, okay? But then he would have started treating her as a wife when she was 12, in the sense that that's when he would have been able to consummate the marriage with her. And then contemporary writers, they remark that Richard treated Isabella affectionately, and he intended to wait until she was older. To what age? 12?
12.
Before they lived together as husband and wife and basically consummate the marriage together. So we have to give praise to Richard II, that for all the years he was married to Isabella of Valois, he refrained from engaging in any sexual relations with her, even though it was his wife. And there was nothing actually stopping him.
Well, like, there's no evidence for both sides.
There's no evidence on both sides. But that's where we're at. So, Richard's deposition then. So when Richard was deposed, he was overthrown by his cousin Henry IV of England. He's taken over.
You see, in history, that's always been the case, hasn't it?
Cousins.
You know, brothers kill brothers over power, cousins kill cousins over power.
Power, yeah. Interesting, you know. And I'll give you a little summary later on as well, inshallah. But Richard's deposition then, when he was overthrown by his cousin, at that time, Isabella was 10 years old. So she was 10 years old, and she was deeply upset by Richard's passing. But before that, she was deeply upset by Richard's imprisonment. And Isabella was still in France at the time, in the year 1400, when she heard about her husband having died. So firstly, he's been captured and imprisoned. She was still his wife. Then he's died. Now she's become a widow at the age of 10. So this is a bit about Isabella. Then what's happened now, an interesting twist to the tale, is the Henry IV. Who's Henry IV here?
He's the one who
got rid of?
Got
rid of. Yeah, we could say he killed him, but he was imprisoning him, didn't he?
Got rid of him, yeah.
He got rid of him.
The power.
Henry IV got rid of Richard II. Isabella is the widow of Richard II. Henry IV then proposed marrying Isabella to his own son. Look at this.
To his own son, yeah.
So he's basically saying to Isabella,
now she's 10, isn't she?
She's 10. Your husband's died.
Yeah.
I overthrew him. He abdicated the throne. I imprisoned him. He died. You're now a 10-year-old widow. Henry IV is proposing that Isabella, who's now 10 years old, the widow of Richard II, marries Henry IV's son, who is later going to become Henry V. Right? So he wants to arrange this marriage. Again, another arranged marriage between Isabella and the future Henry V of England. But the French court refused. Right? She didn't have a choice in the matter. If the French had agreed, the French court, she would have been getting married to him. But the French court refused to allow this marriage to take place between Henry V, who would become Henry V.
Okay, sorry, looking at this now, right? When did the women in the West actually have a voice?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
1960?
I think definitely in the 1900s.
1900s, wasn't it?
100% in the 1900s. And we'll see when the marriage age came in and all of this as well. Often what would happen is that the decision to marry would be left to parents. Who you would marry.
For example, here now, if the court refused over here, now if court didn't refuse, then she would have to marry him.
She would have had to marry.
She had no choice.
Yeah, and when she was asked, I mean, you really think she would have been asked at the age of 6 that, oh, Isabella, would you like to marry this 29-year-old man? And do you think she would have said yes at the age of 6? No.
No,
there was no consent from her point of view in terms of she just did what her parents wanted her to do. And this was what she went along with, and this was the norm.
Here, we see one of the real beauties of Islam here, where a Muslim girl, she cannot get married without her consent, without her agreeing.
She has to agree. If she doesn't agree, there's no marriage. And here it's quite different. So Islam is saying that the consent of both parties is required. Yeah. And the support of the family is encouraged. Yeah. And Isabella, she didn't say, Richard, they didn't say that, let's go out for a while, let's be boyfriend and girlfriend, let's do a try before you buy situation where we engage in a relationship. And
she didn't say, I don't know, marry this Buddha.
I don't want to marry this old man. I don't want to marry this guy who's, king of England, etc. But anyway, stories come out of stories. So Henry IV has proposed that his son marry Isabella. French court has refused. So what then ended up happening is there's so many twists to the tale. Henry V, who's the son of Henry IV, who did they want Henry V to marry? Isabella, who's the widow of Richard II. He's now aged 33. Yes. And what ended up happening was Henry V ended up marrying Princess Catherine. Henry V was 33 years old. Princess Catherine was 18 years old. And Princess Catherine was the sister of Isabella. So look what's happened there. That Henry V was supposed to marry Isabella. The French court refused. So who did he end up marrying? Her sister. So instead of Isabella becoming his wife, she became his sister-in-law. She became the Sali, right? So they were still pursuing that. That look, okay, marry Henry V to Isabella. No, the French courts refused. But then they agreed, and he got married to her sister. So then this is this was the norm at the time, that you're saying no about this daughter, then how about this daughter? You're saying no to this daughter, how about this daughter? Anyway, he was 33. He married 18-year-old Catherine. Isabella of Valois, who is our topic of discussion, in the year 1401, she returned back to France with her dowry, and her royal household traveled with her, and she went back to France now. So she's a widow now, okay? So now, 5 years later, Isabella, who's now 17 years old, she's 17 now. Remember, she became a widow at the age of 10. Then she's come back to England. Back to France rather, and she's now 17 years old, and she's engaged in her second marriage. What was her first marriage? To Richard II at the age of 6. Her second marriage now that she's had is at the age of 17. And who did she marry? Her cousin. She married a cousin who was called Charles, and Charles at that time was 12 years old.
So she was older.
She was 5 years older than her cousin Charles.
And that's her first cousin.
And that was her first cousin, and that was a cousin marriage. This wasn't Pakistanis having cousin marriages at the time. We were not talking about Muslims having cousin marriages, or Indians or Bengalis. This is the former Queen of England from France, widow of the king, marrying her first cousin. She's 17 and he is 12. And he was the Duke of Orleans, one of the leading princes of France. Anyway, Isabella, she died on the 13th of September, 1409 at the age of 19.
So 2 years after her marriage.
2 years after her marriage, second marriage, she died shortly after giving birth to her only child called Joan of Orleans. So you can see here, Richard II married twice. Isabella married twice.
Arranged marriage. Cousin marriage.
It's all there. Then the marriage age.
You see, if this was if it was some normal people, it's something different. But these are like royal families.
These are the granddads and the grandmas of the people.
Sometimes you see on social media how certain people go against, especially against Pakistanis.
Yeah,
arranged marriages, cousin marriages.
It's there in your history.
Age marriages.
It's in your history.
They don't see the history. They're blind.
It's in your history. You call these people white British.
Maybe there are two reasons. One's they're ignorant. They just turn a blind eye to it. And second is they just can't read this kind of stuff. They don't want to know.
This is British, English, white British, whatever you want to call it, Anglo-Saxon. These are, you everybody else is foreign. These are your own people.
And these are facts. We're not making
I didn't write the history. I read history, but I don't write history.
We're not making this stuff up. This is facts.
And I tell you what, we're making history by talking about this today. But it's very interesting. So historical significance then, Isabella's marriage to Richard II produced no heirs. There was no heirs off the back of that. Why were there no heirs? Because it said that the marriage was not consummated.
Consummated.
And it was obviously an important diplomatic alliance between England and France. And what they were trying to do is say that if the King of England can marry a princess of France and they had children, then the heir to the throne would be someone who is mixed. You could call him mixed race. Yes? Half caste. If you like, yeah. One is English, one is French.
One is French.
So they're mixed, half English, half French. But anyway, there were no children. And Richard was overthrown 3 years after being the wedding, and the hopes of making the marriage, a symbol of peace, that hope was short-lived. Yeah, because he died so soon after. And today now, Isabella is remembered as being one of the youngest queens in English history. In which history? English history. And as a figure whose life illustrates how medieval royal children were often used to secure political alliances rather than to make personal choices. So this clearly indicates that Isabella of Valois' marriage to Richard II was not a personal choice on her behalf. Rather, it was an attempt for political alliance. And this was the norm at the time. Okay, this was the norm. And in fact, Richard married her when she was 6. And at that time, he could have even married her when she was 1, 2, 3. There was no law at the time to say that he cannot marry her at the age of 4, 5, 6. He could have married her at the age of 1. He could have married her at the age of 6 months old. She could have been a 6-month-old baby. And he could have still married her according to the law.
Was it arranged marriage?
Arranged marriage. The only thing that was stopping him was the fact that the church had imposed a restriction to say that the marriage could not be consummated until the age of 12. However, the contract of the marriage could be done at any age. So what happened? His contract was done at the age of 6 with her, when she was 6 and he was 29. And consummation would have taken place at the age of 12. So the consummation age that they gave at the time, that was 12, but there's no age with regards to when the actual marriage contract could take place. So regarding their marriage then, it's one of the most unusual royal marriages at the time and in the late Middle Ages. And again, as I say, it was arranged primarily for diplomatic reasons. Another thing to understand and a point I want to highlight is that just because Richard II married a 6-year-old does not mean everyone was marrying 6-year-olds. Because what age was her sister when she got married?
She was 18.
18, right? And Henry V was 33. So was it the norm for children to get married at the age of 6, 5, 4, 3? Was it norm? No, it wasn't the norm. But was it wrong? Was it taboo? No. So just because there is a marriage, a marriage has happened, or just because the law allows for a 6-year-old to get Isabella to marry, it doesn't mean that that's wide practice. Yes? So in any faith, in any religion, like in the Christianity here, what the Christians are saying is that the marriage could take place at any time, but the consummation can only take place at the age of 12. 12 years old for the female. That's the only time the consummation can take place in the marriage. But the marriage could take place at any time. So this is what the Christian faith is saying, that the marriage contract can be done at any time, but the consummation can only be done later on. So key facts regarding the marriage is what I've mentioned. They had their marriage at the church. And this was a marriage that took place in France, but it was then under the English control. And Isabella was crowned Queen of England in Westminster. Yeah, Westminster Abbey, the famous Westminster Abbey. And this took place in 1397. As I mentioned, Richard was 29, she was 6. And the previous marriage I've also mentioned of Anne of Bohemia. Was the marriage consummated? Historians generally agree that it was not, because she was so young. And they lived separately, but he definitely did go and visit her. and go and see her. Didn't have any children. And then he was deposed. She returned to France. She then got married again. And when she went back, she married Charles, who was her cousin, Duke of Orleans. Now, let's talk a little bit about the legal age of marriage, maybe.
No, yeah.
There's something you want to ask? Or?
We can go through the history and talk about what was the legal age in certain eras, certain years, certain times. So we start, before the 12th century. We can start from the...
Some people don't even know. Some people don't even know what do we mean by... We're currently in which century? 21st century.
21st century.
I mean, it's 21st century and this and that. Okay, let's start from the 12th century.
Let's go back a little bit.
12th century. Before the 12th century, 1200 years. Yeah? Before the 12th century, there was no fixed statutory age for marriage. So in Anglo-Saxon England, before 1066.
The year 1066.
Yeah. The Norman Conquest. Yeah. And in Anglo-Saxon England, there was no single nationwide legal minimum age of marriage. Yeah. Marriage customs were varied. And local customs were varied. And the church influence gradually shaped the practice. So prior to the 12th century, there was no set age restrictions. It was just whatever was acceptable according to the norms at the time. Right? That was the situation. After the Norman Conquest, as I mentioned, the Norman Conquest in 1066, yes, Battle of Hastings and the Norman Conquest, the church increasingly started to control marriage law. So at one point, there's no law. And then in the year 1140, which is now within the 12th century, yes, because after 1100 years, 1101, 1102, this is now the 12th century. So 1140 to 1534, what we call this is now known as the medieval canon law. Canon means that it's linked to religious teachings, and religious scripture and religious law. So for 400 years, right, 394 specifically, but if I round it up, 400 years. So the first 1200 years, no minimum age, no statutory age, no legal national age, etc. Just according to whatever the customs were of the time. Which means anyone could have got married at any age at that time. And they could have consummated the marriage at any age as well. Right? There was no restrictions in the first 1200 years. In 1140 then, the church recognized the age of puberty as the minimum age for valid marriage. This was in the year 1140.
1140.
The church recognized age of puberty, not the mosque. Not the mosque recognized, not the Gurdwara, not the temple, not the synagogue. The church recognized the age of puberty as the minimum age for a valid marriage. And then the valid marriage age was different for boys and girls. Girls, the age they put was 12. And
the church put this age.
The church. The church has said the age of puberty for boys is 14 and for girls it is 12. These ages, 12 and 14, became the legal standard throughout medieval England and remained so for centuries. Centuries, yeah? And they're saying now that it is important to distinguish between the marriage itself in terms of engagement and marriage. So there's a distinction in according to English history. They're saying that noble children were often engaged much younger than the age of 12 and 14 respectively. So asking for the hand in marriage for a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, this was the norm amongst the noble children.
Okay, like doing an engagement.
Engagement. And this is the nobility are doing this.
The noble
individuals, the highest ranking individuals in society have this common practice of formally getting their children engaged at a very young age, before the age of 12 and 14. The marriage ceremony itself might occur before puberty. So the marriage ceremony itself might occur before
the
puberty.
walima itself.
What we would call the aqdun nikah. Yeah, the marriage contract, they're saying here that the marriage ceremony itself may occur before puberty. However, consummation and cohabitation was generally expected to wait until the parties were older, particularly amongst the nobility. But when I say that the consummation and cohabitation, what age? 12 for girls and 14 for boys. So they're saying that the marriage contract could have been done earlier, but only once the puberty was reached could marriage consummation take place. And bear in mind here, Brother Shahid, there's no mention of 18. There's no mention of 21, 25, 16. We're talking single numbers. We're taking 12 and 14. We're talking 6 and 9. So this is the situation. This is why the marriage of Richard II and Isabella of Valois could legally occur even though Isabella was only 6.
Only 6.
Because you know the time, what we're talking about here is Richard II. When did he become king? He became king in the year 13.
At the age of 10.
77. He became king. What century was that? 14th century.
14th century.
When did the rules change? In the 12th century.
Before he became a king, obviously.
Before he became the king. So before the 12th century, there were no rules. And then when he became king, in the 12th century, rules started. He became king in the 14th century. So when he became king in the 14th century, his marriage is an example that under Christian canon law, under church law, a marriage could take place before the age of 12 and 14 respectively, like in the case of Isabella and Richard, but the marriage could not be consummated until she reached the age of 12. Is that clear? So what time period is Richard operating in? In the medieval time, in the 14th century. Which law has been put in place here? The canon law. Right?
The girl is 12 and boy is 14.
Girls 12. So what you would say is, even though they say girls 12 and boys 14, the church is saying that the contract of marriage can take place before like that. In the case of Richard and Isabella. But the consummation cannot take place until the age of 12 and 14. And again, as I say, this was the church law, not the mosque law. And then what's happened is they're saying that this is why Richard was able to marry Isabella, and the marriage could legally occur even though she was only 6 years old. And this is according to the church canon law. Then, in the year 1534, so what century we are in now? The 16th century.
16th century.
So for 400 years, it remained 12 and 14. Yeah? 12 and 14 for 400 years, 4 centuries. Then there was something called the English Reformation. And this is when, do you know what the English Reformation is? English Reformation is when King Henry VIII separated the English church from Rome.
Okay.
Because it was all Catholicism, wasn't there? It was all Catholics. Catholicism was Christianity.
Okay.
Then when Henry VIII wanted to remarry, and he had issues regarding the Pope not allowing him to remarry, etc., because he'd married so many women and killed so many of them and all of this. Henry VIII is famous for that. So Henry VIII, what he did was, well, if the law doesn't allow me to do what I need to do, then I'll make a different law, right? Because I am the king. So Henry VIII, he separated the English church from Rome in the year 1534. So we're in the 16th century now. And do you think he changed the minimum age of marriage?
Henry VIII.
Yes. When he ended the English Reformation? No.
He kept
it
the same. 12 and 14.
12 for girls, 14 for boys. This remained the case for another 219 years after the English Reformation. Then there's in the year 1753, the Marriage Act 1753 was introduced, and there were some regulations imposed. But what happened to the age of 12 and 14 remained.
Amen. But just quickly look at Henry VIII. I just searched him up here. Henry VIII had 6 wives during his reign. And a common way to remember what happened to each wife is divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived.
There you go. There's Henry VIII.
Henry
yes?
VIII.
So interesting.
Quite ruthless.
Interesting. So 6 wives, yeah?
6 wives.
And then not only that, he also had a number of mistresses as well.
So his first wife, Catherine, he divorced second wife and executed for alleged treason, adultery.
Well, he himself had a number of mistresses,
Yeah.
as well as the wives that he had. So in this now, the Marriage Act, there was no change. It remained 12 and 14.
The age remained the same.
Yeah.
Girls 12.
If you're
and boys
interested in
14.
Henry VIII, maybe we can talk about him one day, and we'll talk about Henry's marriages and the divorced and beheaded and died, and then divorced, beheaded and survived. And so now in the year 1823, for the next 77 years, this was known as the Victorian reforms. And various 19th century reforms took place, and they modernized marriage procedures, registration, civil marriage, etc. However, the age still remained 12 and 14. And they're saying, look, in practice, though, marriages at these ages, 12 and 14, had become extremely rare by the Victorian period. But the point is that the church law of 12 and 14 still remained.
So this law remained.
This law remained all the way until 1929.
From 1140.
From 1140, because remember, before 1140, there wasn't anything. From the 12th century, which is the year 1140 onwards, all the way to 1929. Because now 1929, they're in the 20th century. Yeah. So then now in 1929, which is less than 100 years ago, because we're in 2026 right now. So 97 years ago is when the first change away from 12 and 14 took place.
In over 700 years.
97 years ago, the changes took place. That's after 1929 years of, well, initially 12 centuries of nothing.
Yeah.
And then you could say 7 centuries of 12 and 14.
Over 700 years.
Throughout history.
Throughout history.
And then what's happened is the first modern minimum age was applied in the year 1929. And this is the first major change in over 700 years. Yeah, the change from 12 and 14. And then what did they do at this time in 1929? The minimum age for everyone became 16. So for 700 years, they are distinguishing between male and female. Female 12, male is 14. Yeah. And because they're recognizing that females reach puberty earlier, but still it's 12 and 14. And then it's now 16 for all people. Okay. And anyone marrying someone under 16 became void. So 16 was the age. This was now the abolishment of the medieval puberty rule of 12 and 14. Now that rule that was imposed by the church,
it's abolished.
That has now been abolished. The church's rules have now been rejected. The church is now losing its influence.
So this rule, who made this rule then in 19?
This was at that time it was made by the
first modern minimum age.
By the government at the time. Yeah.
So churches are out of the picture now.
Church's influence is being reduced now. And 1929, then the Marriage Act, 1929. So then what's happened is that this medieval puberty rule has been removed. And then in the 1949 Marriage Act, so now 20 years later, yeah. So for centuries and centuries, nothing happens. And then 1929, it comes 16. And then, and we'll give a summary at the end as well. And 1949, anyone under 16 is void. And anyone who is 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, parental consent is required.
So based on age 16 to 20, parental consent
is required
for marriage.
And then 21 and over, no parental consent needed.
So you're basically an adult at the age of 21.
You can marry independently at the age of 21. But before that, even if you're 18, 19, 20, it was not permitted for you to marry. This was probably what you would call the highest age in terms of the restrictions. You might call this the toughest restrictions, if you like, yeah? That they're saying anything under 16 is not allowed. 16 to 20 is parental consent, and then 21 plus, no parental consent is needed. So remember, we went from 1929 to 49 to now 69.
69.
So Family Law Reform Act in 1969, the age of maturity, or they call majority in terms of you become a major and elder person, is reduced from 21 to 18. So you know when we said about the 21, you can marry by yourself, now they reduced it from 21 to 18.
To 18 years.
So every time a reforms happened, the current party has said they were wrong. We need to change this. They were wrong. We need to change this. That's not right. We need to change this. So now, for 20 years, it's remained that you need parental consent even at the age of 20. No parental consent from the age of 21. Now it's been reduced to the 18. From then on from 1969 until very recently, until 4 years ago, the marriage age was this. That 16, you could get married. 17, you could get married. But you needed parental consent.
Age of 16 and 17.
16 and 17. Or you needed court consent. Yeah, at the age of 16 and 17. 18 and overs could marry freely. And most people listening to us now will be familiar with this setup of 16 and 17 with parental consent, and 18 and over could marry freely. Just before the law changed, I did a nikah. I conducted a marriage ceremony, and the girl at the time was 17. Young lady was 17 at the time, and parental consent was there, and they got married. But then literally that was in February 2023.
Okay, when this law changed in
Just
February.
before, it was early February 2023. And then on the 27th of February 2023, the Marriage and Civil Partnership Act 2022 was passed, and the minimum age became as follows: that the minimum legal age for marriage is now 18 for all people.
For everybody, girl and a boy.
Girl and boy. And no parental or judicial consent can permit marriage below the age of 18. And the law also criminalizes marriages involving under 18s, even if the ceremony is not legally recognized itself. So what is the law right now? The law right now is that marriage is only permitted if both parties are 18 or above. 18 or above, then that's only when they will be allowed to marry each
So
other.
now the law is any person under the age of 18, they get
Cannot marry.
married, they're breaking the law.
They're breaking the law. And not only that, there's something I will add in here, which I've mentioned previously, and it created quite a bit of reaction on social media, is that consent for sex is 16 for boys and girls. Consent for sex is 16. But consent for marriage is 18.
18.
So for 2 years, someone could be in a relationship, they could have consensual sex, they can conceive, they can have a baby. Their baby could be 1.5, 2 years old before they get married at the age of 18. Why have they put the marriage at the age of 18? To say that you're not mature enough to take on the responsibility of being a husband and wife.
But you're mature enough to have a baby at 16.
This is it. But then the people will say, oh, but there's such thing as contraception, and you guys don't know what contraception is, and blah, blah, blah. Look, we know what contraception is. But do your 16-year-olds not get pregnant? Do your 17-year-olds not get pregnant? Islamically, consent for sex is nikah.
Marriage.
You're only allowed to have sex with your wife. So if she's your wife, you can have sex with her. If she's not your wife, you can't. But the thing here is, you can have sex, but you can't be married.
You can't be married.
Right?
So if you look at this here, if you go back in history, you see the first rules were made by the church. It was like religious rules, weren't they?
Yeah.
Right? But when it changed to the government rules, you see the difference.
That's right. And look, the interesting thing here is, the marriage could take place first, consummation would be after.
After.
Now, Consummation is first,
marriage is
and
after.
marriage is after.
And majority don't even get married. Majority in this, especially this country, you see so many young girls, they're single mothers.
Single mothers, because the guy does what he needs to do and off he goes.
There's no responsibility.
And,
I believe really with marriage, it brings the responsibilities.
Absolutely.
So marriage, you're in a contract and you're responsible
Then
for
have
that
children
person.
and bring them up in a stable family, not single parent families that, the women are left to struggle because, and some of them don't even know who their father is. And then, one night stands, or, you had a father and who was he and what did he look like and why did he not look after me, right? So this is the thing. Anyway, to summarize the timeline, before the year 1140, right? So before the 12th century, there's no uniform statutory minimum age for marriage. And then from the 12th century all the way up to the 20th century, it remained 12 for girls and 14 for boys. Then it's only in the 20th century that things started changing. Yeah? So now, 1929 to 1949 is 16 for both sexes, male and female. And then 1949 to 1969 for the next 20 years, 16 parental consent required under 21. Then it's been changed again from 1969 to 2023, 16 plus with parental consent and 18 independently. And then since 27th of February 2023, it is 18 in all cases.
Last 3 years ago.
So the striking aspect of history in England is a legal minimum age remained 12 for girls and 14 for boys for roughly 800 years. On top of the fact that prior to that, there was no law.
There's no law.
When there was a law, the law remained for 800 years. And nearly all of the changes that have come about due to the marriage age have been brought around more recently. And these are now closer to modern expectations. This is the key thing here, modern expectations. And raising the minimum age from 16 to 18, it's all taken place within the last century. Okay, and that said, as I mentioned earlier, that the legal minimum age was not the same as the typical age of marriage. Throughout history, regardless of which culture, religion, background, nationality you go to, the legal minimum age was not the typical age.
Wasn't.
And it isn't. So in Christianity, the legal minimum age is not the typical age. Like Richard II has married Isabella, the age that she got married, that was 6. So it was legally allowed. But was it typical? No. And the example is that the second person she got married to, how old was she? 17. And her cousin was?
12.
12 at the time, wasn't he? Was he 12 or? It was 12, yeah? And then when her sister got married,
she was 18.
She was 18. So are they all getting married at 8, 6, 4? No. It was an exception. It was allowed. It was fine. It was for political reasons, whatever it was. So Richard II got married, as I said, to Isabella of Valois, and they had the marriage. They say the marriage wasn't consummated. But in summary, what I want to mention here, and the reason for us talking about Richard II and his marriage to Isabella, is that people need to recognize and educate themselves and recognize that things were different at different times. And you cannot use today's standard to measure historical events and occurrences. Similarly, in 500 years' time, there will be people passing laws, and we will be history, and they will be looking back and reflecting at what we're doing. And they will make laws according to the modern times and feelings and conveniences that they have. Is it impossible in future for the minimum marriage age to be raised to 40?
Anything's possible.
Somebody may say that's ridiculous, but is it not possible? That's what I'm talking about. I'm saying, is it possible for a law to be passed to say that you cannot marry until you're the age of 40?
Yeah,
it could happen.
It can happen.
And
look in history, the changes.
What do we have to say about that? And what will they say about us? They'll say, can you believe this? They were allowing marriage at 18.
At 18.
They will say, in our way, astaghfirullah, tawbah, they allowing marriage at the age of 18. How could they be allowing such young people to marry? Rather, the marriage age should be at 40. So who knows what's going to happen in the future? We know what's happened in the past. We know what's happening now. And this was just a little blast from the past. look at the history of England, the King and Queen of England. And I just to summarize, I just want to mention we've had it all today. We've had the young marriages, we've had arranged marriages, we've had cousin marriages, we've had also what else have we had? We had
Arranged, cousin,
multiple marriages,
age.
yes, we've had it all.
We've had it all,
Yes,
mashallah.
we've had it all.
So
And,
I think we've had it all now. I think
that's
this
it.
comes to
It's
the end
done.
of our live podcast today. And Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Muhammad Ali, for an amazing history lesson
Alhamdulillah.
and the history that we, all of us, people that actually go and talk about certain topics without knowing the history, and they get it all completely wrong. And I would say, for them people, they need to be taught a lesson in history, and
Absolutely.
it's very important. So I think we'll end the podcast for today, inshallah. Do you have any last words to
The
say?
last thing one thing that comes to mind is that, remember, when Richard II became king, this was 800 years after Hijrah.
800 years after the
Yes.
Hijrah. Yeah.
So if somebody now says something about Islam, put Islam to one side, because Islam came 800 years before the practices that we have just been discussing. So this isn't like it was before Islam. This is after Islam.
800 years after Islam.
800 years after Islam. 800 years after the marriage of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with his blessed wives, the marriage of the Sahaba with their wives. Yes, 800 years after the life in Makkah, life in Medina. This is life in England and in France. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept what has been said.
Ameen. Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah, this is the end of today's podcast. So, brothers and sisters, please follow our channel, subscribe to our channel. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.